There is a structure to greatness and architecture built not on talent, but on training, a design hidden in the folds of your nervous system, waiting to be activated. Every person who has ever shaped history, led movements, written their legacy in stone. They were not superhuman. The eyes are not just for seeing. They are the most powerful steering wheel of your brain. When you change where and how you look, you change what your brain focuses on, how your body prepares for action, and how your mind locks in. Your visual field is the control panel of your internal state. The moment your gaze narrows, a cascade of neural and chemical shifts begins. The pupils constrict, the lens flattens. And deep in the brain, circuits in the locus coeruleus and prefrontal cortex light up, mobilizing attention as if your life depends on it, because at one time it did. Focus is not a gift, it is a physiological event you can command. When a warrior steps into battle, their eyes don't wander. They lock, not because of motivation, but because of necessity. Their survival depends on precision. That same system, that same wiring, exists in you now, and you can activate it at will. When you direct your gaze with intensity on a single point, a specific target, you initiate the release of norepinephrine. This chemical acts like a spotlight in the brain, highlighting what matters and suppressing what doesn't. The distractions don't disappear, they just lose their grip. This is not self-help, it is biology. The retina sends direct signals to areas of the brain that regulate arousal and effort. Vision is the only sense with a direct pipeline to the seat of action. Your ability to focus isn't about forcing your brain into silence. It's about giving it a clear command, a locked target. You were never meant to multitask, you were built to hunt. In ancient rituals, prophets and priests used fixed gaze as a doorway to deeper realms. In the silence of a temple, they would fix their eyes on a flame, a symbol, a sacred text not to read, but to burn through illusion. They understood what modern science is only now catching up to, that the act of seeing with intention alters the mind's architecture. Every second you hold your gaze, you train the brain to resist impulse. Every moment you resist the pull of distraction, you etch new grooves into the circuitry of attention. This is not discipline imposed from outside, it is focus forged from within. The ability to direct attention is the ability to shape reality. There is power in stillness. There is power in choosing where to look and refusing to look away. In that resistance, the nervous system learns to obey. The brain stops chasing novelty and starts building depth. It's in this still, focused state that transformation begins. You are not at the mercy of your wandering mind. You are the architect, but you must begin with your eyes, because when the eyes lock, the brain follows, and when the brain follows, the body awakens. And when the body awakens, there is nothing you cannot move, shift, build, or overcome. Dopamine is not pleasure. That's the first lie we've been told. It is not the reward itself. It is the pursuit, the anticipation, the hunger that drives us toward the goal. It is the fire behind every act of courage, every burst of energy, every moment you rise when your body wants to quit. It's not just a molecule, it's a message from the deepest part of the brain, echoing from the ancient past, telling you to keep going, keep seeking, keep building. And yet, in the modern world, we waste it. We give it away to scrolling screens, shallow victories, and false urgency. We burn through it on notifications and novelty, and then wonder why we have no drive left when it really matters. Dopamine is the fuel of warriors and builders, and if you learn to master it, you will never again wait for motivation. You will generate it. Every time you chase a goal, the brain releases dopamine, but the highest performers don't chase the outcome, they learn to fall in love with the effort. They anchor dopamine to the process, not to the trophy, but to the sweat, not to the applause, but to the grind. When you reward yourself mentally for showing up, for pushing through friction, for embracing discomfort, the brain rewires. It begins to see challenge as the cue for reward. This is not mind, set its chemistry, and it can be trained. The striatum, the nucleus accumbens, the ventral tegmental area, all of them begin to light up not just when success is reached, but when it is struggled for. This is how the ancients built pyramids. This is how prophets fasted for 40 days and nights and walked into deserts with no map. They weren't waiting for motivation, they were fueled by conviction, and conviction lights dopamine like wildfire. They didn't spike their reward systems with artificial highs. They aimed their dopamine toward a vision and then paid for it with discipline. Every breath of resistance, every step into adversity, every moment of silent labor was not a punishment, it was the path. And in that path, dopamine became sacred. You cannot hack this system by shortcuts. If you try to cheat dopamine, it will punish you. Flood it with comfort, and you will kill your hunger. Spike it with pleasure, and you will numb your drive. But anchor it to the daily pursuit of excellence, to the cold shower, the early morning, the final rep when no one is watching, and you will unlock something unshakable. You will move through the world with a fire that doesn't go out. The world will see it in your eyes. Because when dopamine is aligned with your purpose, you do not need to be pushed. You pull your future toward you. You are not waiting, you are hunting, you are not hoping, you are advancing. Your brain does not run on willpower. It runs on rhythms, ancient cycles hardwired into your biology that determine when you can access your peak and when you must retreat. These rhythms are not optional, they are not abstract. They are encoded into the neural fabric of your being, unfolding in waves every 90 to 120 minutes. These are ultradian cycles, the natural rise and fall of alertness, focus, and energy throughout the day. Ignore them, and you will battle friction with every step. Align with them, and your mind will cut through complexity like a blade through silk. It is not about working harder. It is about working in rhythm with the neurochemical tides God Himself wrote into your body. When you are in the ascending phase of an ultradian cycle, your brain is flooded with acetylcholine and norepinephrine chemicals that heighten attention, enhance plasticity, and sharpen cognition. This is your window, your zone, your sacred hour. This is where you make war on distraction and claim the deepest focus available to the human nervous system. But if you push past that wave, if you grind through fatigue and ignore the descent, you enter cognitive quicksand. Cortisol rises, dopamine tanks, the brain grows foggy, defensive, and depleted, and instead of building, you begin to break. The world glorifies hustle, but heaven glorifies order. The sun rises, the tide turns, the breath expands and contracts. Nothing in creation operates without rhythm. Your brain is no different. The highest performers don't push through walls. They learn to ride the wave. They track the cycles of their attention, mark their peaks, and carve sacred space for undisturbed work during those windows. And when the cycle descends, they don't resist, they reset. They step back, breathe, walk, pray, restore the vessel. And in doing so, they return stronger, sharper, more precise. This is why monks rise early and meditate in stillness. Why warriors train before dawn. Why prophets retreat to the wilderness in silence. Because the quiet hours align with the beginning of a cycle when the mind is uncluttered and the spirit is most alert. In that space, with no noise, no notification, no intrusion, you are able to do the kind of work that shapes identity and alters destiny. You are not built to be on all day. That is a lie of modern efficiency. You were designed for cycles of power and restoration. When you learn to live by these waves, you stop fighting your biology and begin harnessing it. The brain becomes your ally. Time bends to your rhythm, and in the stillness between cycles, revelation emerges, the mind sharpens. The fog lifts, and you begin to operate not just with clarity, but with conviction. The human brain is not a machine built for ease. It is a fortress built through friction. Inside your skull lies a structure called the prefrontal cortex, the seat of focus, planning, restraint, and will. But it does not awaken by chance. It does not grow through convenience. It is forged in the fire of resistance. When you place your mind into deliberate friction, when you choose effort over comfort, discipline over impulse, challenge over ease, you ignite a process deeper than behavior. You trigger the machinery of neuroplasticity. You signal to the brain, this is important, adapt, strengthen. Rewire, every time you resist distraction, you lay another brick in the fortress. Every time you delay gratification, you fortify the gates. And every time you follow through when the feelings fade, when the energy is gone, when no one is watching, that's when the prefrontal cortex grows in strength, synapse by synapse. This is not theory. This is the language of the nervous system. Effort is not just noble, it's a biological trigger, a signal to elevate your identity, a divine key placed in your body to transform weakness into mastery. The ancients understood this. That's why prophets fasted. That's why disciples trained in silence. That's why kings rose in the cold and knelt in prayer before dawn. They were not chasing suffering, they were summoning strength. Because strength is not built in the moment you feel powerful. It is built in the moment you feel weak, and choose action anyway. The prefrontal cortex doesn't care how you feel. It responds to what you do, and when you do hard things on purpose, your brain begins to believe you are capable of more. That belief becomes biology, that biology becomes identity, and that identity becomes unstoppable. The prefrontal cortex is wired to reward effort, not with pleasure, but with expansion. It's not the dopamine hit of a distraction. It's the deep, satisfying knowing that you stayed on the path, that you did what needed to be done, that you remained in the fire without flinching, and in that fire you became something new. This is not punishment, it's purification, a test of your inner architecture, and every test passed is a signal to the brain, build deeper roots. Harden the steel, prepare for greater weight. If you want to reshape your destiny, you must first rewire your will. And to rewire your will, you must confront friction daily, deliberately, with reverence. Not for pain's sake, but for power's. Because power doesn't come from ease. It comes from training the mind to stay steady when everything around it wavers. The battlefield is not out there. It's within, and your prefrontal cortex is the sword. Train it, sharpen it. Use it because when it is fully awakened, no force of chaos, doubt, or fear can shake what you've built within. The brain does not change because you wish it to. It changes because you command it to again and again through action repeated under pressure. Discipline is not a trait. It is not a mood. It is a rewiring of neural circuits, a reconfiguration of pathways between the frontal lobe and the limbic system, forged through deliberate, repeated decisions in the face of resistance. Every time you choose structure over chaos, intention over reaction, you open a neuroplastic window, an opportunity to reshape the patterns that define how you think, how you act, and ultimately, who you become. The brain listens closely in moments of struggle. That is when the sculpting begins. There are neurons in your brain right now waiting to fire, waiting to wire together, waiting to form the habits that will define the next decade of your life. But they will not move unless you move, unless you act, unless you step into the same action again and again until it stops being a decision and becomes a default. This is the law of neuroplasticity. Neurons that fire together wire together, but the firing doesn't begin with belief. It begins with obedience, not to the world, but to your higher self, to the version of you that knows what must be done and does it even when comfort calls like a siren. This is how every spiritual warrior was trained. This is why ancient rituals involved repetition, rhythm, fasting, prayer, movement, stillness. Because through repetition under discipline, the soul is refined and the mind is transformed. The body obeys and the brain takes notice. New grooves are carved into the neural terrain. The old you begins to fade not through inspiration, but through replacement. You don't escape old patterns, you overwrite them, and the pen you write with is daily, disciplined action. Habit is holy. It is the structure that holds your future, and the brain, though adaptable, is lazy by default. It will return to the easy, the familiar, the comfortable unless you command otherwise. Every day you show up to the same hard thing with intention. You are not just building routine. You are declaring war against entropy. You are telling the brain, we will not be ruled by impulse. We will be ruled by vision. Inside every decision to act is a moment of sacred power. And if you seize it, if you make the choice, not just once, but again and again, you begin to tilt the architecture of your mind toward strength. You begin to move from chaos to clarity, from reaction to rule, from flesh to fire. Discipline is not about denying yourself. It's about designing yourself through repetition, through rewiring, through the quiet, relentless act of returning even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Because that is when the greatest changes are made, not in the comfort of flow, but in the resistance of choice. You cannot burn for long on adrenaline alone. You cannot carry purpose with a nervous system ruled by chaos. The brain, like the body, was not designed for constant warfare. It was designed for strategic bursts of intensity followed by sacred restoration. At the center of this rhythm lies the balance between two powerful forces, cortisol and acetylcholine. One mobilizes, the other sharpens. One drives action, the other drives precision. When they are in balance, the brain becomes a weapon. When they are out of sync, the mind becomes a battlefield of confusion, fatigue, and burnout. You were not created to run endlessly. You were created to rise, strike, and recover. Cortisol is not your enemy. It is the alarm that awakens the warrior within. It elevates alertness, primes the body, sharpens reaction, but it must be controlled. It must be directed like a sword, not left swinging blindly. When cortisol is chronically elevated through stress, poor sleep, overstimulation, or emotional chaos, the brain's circuits begin to fray. Memory weakens, focus splinters, and the drive that once burned like fire begins to collapse into ash. But when you learn to regulate cortisol through light exposure, breath work, and deliberate stillness, it becomes a tool of immense clarity. A surge when needed, then silence. Acetylcholine, on the other hand, is the sculptor of attention. It does not roar. It whispers, it tunes the brain into fine detail, carving sharpness into every thought, precision into every move. It's released when you focus deeply on a single task, when you enter that sacred space of tunnel vision where time bends and distractions die. This is where deep work lives. This is where mastery is built. But acetylcholine cannot function in the flood of constant stress. It requires space, it requires recovery, it requires reverence. The ancients knew this. That is why after battle came prayer. After fire came silence. After warfare came worship. They knew the body must be restored, the mind cleansed, the spirit aligned. Because the warrior that never rests becomes the one who breaks. You were not meant to live in survival mode. You were meant to master survival and then rise into purpose. That means learning how to raise cortisol when it's time to act, and lower it when it's time to rebuild. It means triggering acetylcholine not just through effort, but through sacred focus, deliberate, undistracted, and intentional. In this balance, the brain becomes a vessel of divine strength, not frantic, but forceful, not scattered, but strategic. The highest performing minds do not chase more, they master enough. They rise early, anchor their nervous system in rhythm, and return to stillness without shame. Because they know the true edge is not found in endless grinding. It is found in biological precision. In obeying the laws written into the cells and circuits by the same hand that formed galaxies and carved mountains. When you learn to regulate your chemistry, you don't just perform better. You come into alignment with the order of creation itself.